Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast. I'm your host, and today we've got a return guest. He's a great guy, and he's at the epicenter of technology and the services industry. His name is Thomas Lai. You may remember him coming on the podcast, I think it was back in November 2022, and he's the Executive Director of the Technology and Services Industry Association, TSIA. And we're going to learn more about his insights on the rapidly evolving SaaS landscape. Because in a time where SaaS solutions are ubiquitous, the classic business model, though, for these technologies is beginning to face significant challenges. Mainly thanks to inflation, high interest rates, deflated company valuations, and yes, we need to talk about AI and automation too, right? And all of these factors mean that many SaaS companies might struggle in the coming months, especially when trying to showcase their value proposition. However, adversity often breeds innovation, and those that survive are likely to drastically change their approach to business. And a prominent example of this is the adaptation at Salesforce, which turned into a fantastic success story that has been well documented in the press recently. But in his role, Thomas is actively collaborating with researchers, industry experts, and company executives around the world to carve out a path for the future of successful SaaS ventures. So I've invited Thomas back on the podcast today to learn more about his insights, his experience authoring 7 books on technology, business models, and predictions for the industry in light of the current economic climate. And we'll also discuss the hurdles faced by SaaS companies and identify levers for profitability in these challenging times. And maybe even take a peek into our virtual crystal ball and look at the future of SaaS, especially considering the impacts of big data and AI on the current delivery models. So buckle up and hold on tight, because once again, I'm going to beam your ears all the way to the US, where Thomas is waiting to join us in a voyage into the world of SaaS and much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Thomas. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I serve as the Executive Director for TSIA, which is the Technology and Services Industry Association. We are a for-profit research institute. We've been around for about 20 years, and we do proprietary research on what makes technology business models successful and profitable in today's environment. And also, I've authored and co-authored 7 books related to technology business models. The most recent book was Digital Hesitation, and I think we previously discussed that on your podcast.
We did indeed. Wow, 7 books. What's the secret there? Because I've only written 1, but I've spoke to a few people, and after every book they always say, man, I'm not doing that again. But to do it 7 times,
well,
requires a certain amount of discipline.
Yeah, well, we get the inspiration from what's going on in the industry, and our cadence is about, probably every 2 or 3 years, things change, new trends, the business models are changing in tech, and that inspires us to kind of frame that in for folks. It is a process. There's no doubt about it. And I, get a lot of people say, hey, I want to write a book. Can you help me with that? And I'll say, well, let's start with an outline of the, a structure of it. What are the key chapters? Can you sustain a topic for an entire book? And I would say that about 80% of the people drop off right there. They're done. They're like, okay, I get it. I'm not ready to write a book.
It's funny how quickly things change. I mean, the last time we spoke, I think was in November last year. And the world was a very different place even then, before people went crazy over generative AI. And now it's all anybody's talking about it. So what's been keeping you busy since we last spoke?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. AI is the topic of the day. And I know a lot of your guests have been talking about that. And it is, definitely an exciting development in new technology. But, the story that we're dialed into is what really was unfolding in 2022 with the economic conditions in terms of higher interest rates, higher inflation. That really forced a massive pivot in the technology industry. And because, from about 2006 until 2022, you look at all of these SaaS companies, right, that are out there, and you've interviewed many of their founders and again, great companies, but they were being rewarded primarily just to grow, and profitability was an afterthought. But in these new economic conditions, that all screamed to a halt in 2022, right? And investors started to get really nervous about unprofitable companies. And especially if the company was going to face slower growth as the economy was starting to slow down. SaaS valuations took a massive haircut. VC exits, sort of ground to a halt. They couldn't, get rid of these companies. And so, what we're seeing now is that these enterprise SaaS companies, cannot just go out and get that next round of funding, and they have to change the way they're operating. And it's been really dramatic.
And looking at some of those economic indications there, in the economic factors directly impacting that traditional SaaS business model, what else are you seeing there? And why do you think this might lead to a wave of SaaS companies failing in the near future? And are we going to see a lot of consolidation in the market? What are you expecting to see here?
Yeah, I think this is going to be tricky. It's going to be a rough ride here for a lot of these SaaS companies over the next couple of years. And I can tell you what I've witnessed is this complete 180 in the priorities of SaaS executive teams, complete 180. And we have CEOs and CFOs that have pivoted from this maniacal focus on, gross revenue retention, right? And now it's, hey, what about our margins? What about our profitability? And the question facing many of these leadership teams is simple. Can they get their business model profitable before they burn through their cash reserves? Because again, this next wave of funding is not going to be so easy to secure. And so I think if you're not, growing 40 or 50% a year, VC's not even interested in touching you. And if you don't have a path to being profitable, right, a PE firm's not interested in touching you. And so, all that I think is going to lead to some consolidation and some thinning out of the ranks for sure.
And I think so much of what you said there will resonate with people listening around the world. And with that in mind, what do you think the key strategies will be that will ultimately enable SaaS companies to not only survive, but maybe even thrive in this challenging economic environment and period of uncertainty that we find both here in the UK, 5,000 miles away where you are in the US, and around the world?
Yeah. So, the good news is, because we've been studying this for over a decade in terms of what does profitable SaaS look like. And the good news is, it's clear what levers you can pull to make that business model more profitable. And we categorize it, we put it into three big levers. The first one is just around monetizing service activities that, a lot of these SaaS companies give away for free. It could be premium customer success. It could be premium support motions. It could be some of the professional services. They were giving it away for free before because they were like, hey, I just want to grow. There's real value there for customers. You need to do a better job of monetizing that. So that's number one. The second one is, it's interesting. It's around managing the commercials and how you pick the money off the table. most enterprise software companies, a lot of the commercials or 100% of the commercials are handled by a traditional account executive or salesperson. Some of those commercial activities, like some of the simple renewals, et cetera, that can be done by a customer success manager or renewal specialist. And when you diversify who's, basically handling those contracts, you can reduce the cost of sales and marketing. So that's a big opportunity. And then the last one, and I know you've talked to companies that are product-led growth, it is thinking about what we call the new growth levers. How do you use technology and data to grow more cost effectively? So again, monetize, migrate, and modify the growth engines. Those are sort of the three big levers that we see.
And I think what we're talking about here is impacting everything from a small to medium-sized business to a huge enterprise. And I think Salesforce is a prime example of a SaaS company that has had to change its processes in order to adapt to this current economic situation. So on that side of things, is there anything you can discuss around some of the steps that you might have seen that they've taken and why they've been successful in doing this?
Yeah, sure. And Salesforce is a great company. They've been a TSIA member for many, many years. But let's be honest, they were forced to pivot recently because they had some activist investors, and those investors were agitating for improved profitability. And so Salesforce had to respond to that, and they've done, I think, a phenomenal job of doing just that. I think this morning I was actually just reading an article about their most recent results. And again, a huge bright spotlight on improving margins and how are they doing that? I think they're pulling some of these levers that we're talking about. Number one, they're doing a better job of monetizing service activities. If you go out to their website, you'll see things like outcome accelerators, where they have services to help customers get to business outcomes faster. And of course, they monetize those service activities. They're looking at organizational structure options and synergies between customer success and support. Jim Roth is an executive there. He just delivered an outstanding keynote for us at our recent conference in Orlando a couple of weeks ago, where he talked about how they're rethinking about org structure so they see cost efficiencies there. And it's interesting, their most recent results, they talk a lot about organic growth. And I think a lot of these SaaS companies are realizing they have these install bases. It really is, how do I deliver more value to those existing customers and do a better job of monetizing that value? So I think Salesforce is pulling, all the levers, and I think they provide hope, if you will, right? Yeah. To a lot of the other SaaS companies watching, going, gosh, how are we going to make this pivot? I think they're a good example that this can be done.
And obviously, I'm quite conscious there's about people listening, hearing about the Technology and Services Industry Association for the very first time. Then maybe they missed our first conversation. So first of all, I think we should introduce you guys as if I get this right, it's a research and advisory firm on a mission to help technology companies drive profitable growth. So on that side of things, what insights have you gained in your role there about the path forward for SaaS companies during these trying times?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the most interesting thing to me is, and I was listening to another podcast, they had a founder on that was talking about a product that he had created to help SaaS companies manage all of their software, cost. And he was pitching it to CFOs at SaaS companies, and he could get no traction. They really had no interest, right? They're like, yeah, cost efficiency, whatever. And then 2022 hits, and suddenly these CFOs started to call him and say, hey, that product you were telling me about to save money about, a year ago. And he said, people always talk about product market fit. And he said, this is an example where the market came to our product, right? The market changed, not our product. And it's funny because I feel the same way about some of the research we've been doing at TSIA, because we have been fixated on what it takes for SaaS to be profitable, because we believed for a long time that, you just can't run companies, unprofitably forever, right? I've been in this industry too long. You just realize that that's just not sustainable. And now that has happened. And so as in the chair I sit in, and I watch, all of these SaaS companies do this pivot, right? This is 180 pivot from growth to being, more fixated on profitability. And I think that, one of the really interesting things, I'll give you an example of one of the observations, is you look at these customer success organizations, which, were sort of the new thing on the table about, 7-8 years ago. Everybody needs a customer success organization. A lot of them are what we call financial art projects, right? People start them, they put headcount in there, but they're like, I'm not really sure, what the financial benefit is, but I'm sure good stuff will happen. Well, suddenly, companies are saying, hey, customer success, you basically have to start carrying your own water. Either you start to monetize some of your services, you start to own some of these commercials, you start to prove, how you're going to help drive expansion and renewal. So, you're seeing that shift in mentality. And my advice to these, SaaS executives, some of them, Neil, by the way, I've talked to CEOs and CFOs that now they have never been an executive at a profitable company in their career, ever, right? If they started 20 years ago, right, you could be CEO right now of a SaaS company, and your entire career, you have been managing unprofitable companies. Our advice is you got to lean into more traditional thoughts here about margin and profitability and these P&Ls. And that is, for a lot of these folks is new muscles, right, that they have to build. But again, I think there's messages of hope here. It can be done. You can absolutely make these SaaS business models profitable, but you have to have a different playbook for sure.
100%. And you did mention a few moments ago, you've just come off the back of the World Interact conference in Orlando. And I think one of the great things about any conference is that face-to-face time with people, sharing insights, experiences, etc. So I'm conscious from all those conversations you've had with researchers, industry pundits, company executives about the future of SaaS, about so many other things. Were there any common threads or themes in those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, SaaS as a delivery model is here to stay.
Yeah.
Right. There's no doubt about it. It's not like we're going to go back to old on-prem models. I mean, some of that stuff still exists, but SaaS is here to stay. But having said that, the future of this traditional enterprise SaaS model is under duress, and I think that if the value proposition is, you have, software and hey, here's my new cool SaaS software, and employees can throw some information in here and maybe we can do some basic automation. That value proposition suddenly, and we'll bring in the AI conversation, right?
Yeah.
Looks super dated. And so I think, and I listen to people and they're thinking about their business models, it's really about having a SaaS platform that is going to leverage big data and AI to unlock new levels of insights and capabilities for customers. So I think that the value proposition, if you will, the game has shifted for these SaaS companies to think about, how am I really going to deliver a next generation contemporary value proposition, not the one I was probably hanging my hat on for the past X amount of years.
Yeah, and I think that game has shifted for just about everybody in every single industry right now. And I'm curious for yourselves, what kind of role do you see for industry associations like TSIA in helping SaaS companies navigate these current challenges and transition those business models too?
Oh, I mean, it's a wild time, right? I mean, if you, and again, I know you've been talking to a lot of people that are on the forefront of AI in AI solutions and capabilities and what does it mean? And we're thinking about this, every day and every night, because I mean, AI is it's disrupting SaaS business models. It's disrupting consulting business models, right? It's disrupting writers and researchers. It's disrupting everybody. I mean, we deeply believe that there's nobody who's going to come out unscathed here, that they're not being forced to think differently, right, about how they're doing their job. And as we, really think about that in terms of what it means to being a research institute, the two things that we know, there's still differentiation, right, as opposed to what AI can do, is number one, not all the data is in the public domain. So, whatever and again, this is a message to SaaS companies as well, having proprietary data that unlocks unique insights that is not out there, that's not being scraped by the great AI engines, that there's still people need that. That's number one. And the second thing, and I think this is getting lost a little bit in the AI conversations, is, if you go to something like ChatGPT and you ask it a question, there's two things. I mean, it's definitely, like, for example, if you said, hey, how should I price my new SaaS application? It's going to give you, a good, solid, answer there based, on years and years of content, but it does not have a contemporary answer. In other words, let's say that the economic environment gets really severe this year and pricing strategies have to change. ChatGPT is not going to reflect that. So understanding how business practices are changing in a current environment, that is also a huge value add of, a research institute or anybody who's out there trying to help people in the here and now.
And look, if we dare to look beyond the immediate future, maybe gaze into a virtual crystal ball, how do you see the SaaS industry evolving in the next 5 to 10 years? It's incredibly difficult, bearing in mind what's happened in the last 6 months, but what should SaaS companies be doing now to help prepare for a different future?
Yeah, I mean, I would put this on the table, and I would say this to a SaaS company, I just said this to an executive from one of the largest hardware companies on the planet. We were talking yesterday about what AI, means to disrupting their business model as a hardware provider. And the advice I would give to all of them is the same: is everybody has got to be asking, what is my big data play? What unique data can I aggregate and analyze that unlocks unique value propositions for my customer? I mean, that's what I think every executive team has got to be zeroed in on, because that's where the value is going to be, right? And that's as it relates to, what AI can do for folks.
And as you know, you've been on the podcast before. I always like to end the podcast by asking you to leave the guest with another gift, not just your insights and experiences, But I'm going to ask you to leave either a book that means something to you or a song that we can add to our Spotify playlist. What are you going to leave us this time?
Okay. So, yes, I think last time I mentioned, I mean, I'm a voracious reader of business books, and I always have a good one, top of mind. But I'm going to make a book recommendation, but I'm going to go off script here a little bit. It's actually not a business book. It's more of a political science book, but it's the best book I've read that describes our current, sort of tension and, whether you're talking about the UK or American politics.
Yeah.
And it's called What's Our Problem? By Tim Urban. And it's really a wonderful analysis.
Fantastic. I'll get that added straight to our Amazon wish list. I'll check that out myself. Sounds quite intriguing.
You'll enjoy it. You'll enjoy it.
And as always, for anyone wanting to find out more information about everything we talked about today, we did cover quite a bit in a short amount of time. Where would you send everyone? And also find out more about the conferences and contacting your team, etc. What's the best starting point?
Yeah, it is simple. It's just go to TSIA.com and you can find out everything we got going on.
Well, as we said at the very beginning, SaaS technology solutions are being purchased in all walks of life. But however, that classic SaaS business model is floundering due to many, many different reasons. And of course, the obsession with AI and generative AI and automation is further complicating the mix there. I love chatting with you today. I'd love to get you back on again towards the end of the year, see how things are continuing to evolve. But more than anything, just thanks once again for joining me, Thomas.
Oh, my pleasure, and love to come back.
Once again, I must extend my sincere thanks to Thomas for sharing his expertise and also providing us with a glimpse into the future of SaaS amidst these economic challenges and uncertainty that we see. And the path forward won't be easy, but as we've discussed today, adversity and innovation often go hand in hand. So for anyone listening interested in learning more about TSIA and their work, I highly recommend visiting their website. And I, for one, am going to be taking some of the insights that we've learned today and applying them to my own tech journey, adapting and innovating to meet the challenges ahead. And someone that writes articles for a living for myself and for clients and edits podcasts for businesses, I'm going to be meeting a few challenges head on myself. But as we conclude today's episode of the Tech Talks Daily podcast, let's reflect on some of these profound changes shaping the SaaS landscape and remember the need for adaptability in these tumultuous times. As always, stay curious, keep innovating, and I also cordially invite you to join me again tomorrow for another exciting conversation. But until next time, don't be a stranger.